Kevin Flaherty joins us to do a fantasy draft of KU football players only. Let's do it.
You are listening to KC Sports Network, the #1 podcast network for today's Kansas City sports fans. With former players from your favorite teams, informed perspectives, and former insiders, this is the place for you. KC Sports Network is proudly presented by Emprise Bank, your partner in possible.
Welcome to Booth Review, presented by Emprise Bank. When was the last time you went into a bank? Emprise has wearable banking that allows you to check your account balance, find ATM locations, and receive alerts all from your smartwatch, just as easily as you can check your steps. Don't be tethered to a brick building when the ability to bank is tethered to your wrist. Emprise Bank, member FDIC, our partner in possible here at KC Sports Network. We have a big show today. Very excited to welcome on Scott Chasen. Scott, why don't you just go ahead and intro the guest here today?
I like it. It's the second time we've done this. I'm going to introduce Kent next, and then Kevin Flaherty, a man. Look, for those who do not know, Kevin obviously does great work covering college sports. You can find his stuff, CBS Sports, 24/7 Sports. Kevin's on Twitter. He's great. Okay. Kevin is also a barbecue savant.
Mm-hmm.
And he took Kent and myself to Harp Barbecue this last weekend. It was excellent. They're open something like 4 hours per week. It was very good. Kevin, introduce yourself to the people, but also give a barbecue tip to everyone, because I know that's what people who are listening are really looking for.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the entire draw of having me on at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But no, if you I think one of the really cool things about Kansas City barbecue is that it's going through sort of a renaissance, and you've got a lot of new faces kind of adding in with the ones that we all grew up with, the Arthur Bryants and Gates and everybody. And I think our next sort of new face, if you will, is we're going to have to get to Chef Jay. So that's going to be a good time. Those bacon burn ends for Kent. That's going to hit the spot.
I am hyped beyond belief for those bacon burn ends. I had them in Texas. I was telling these guys I had them in Texas at one spot, and I did some Google research on like bacon burn ends Kansas City, and Chef Jay is the only person that showed up. I am irrationally excited to try those.
Yeah, and Tucker, you need to hold this part of the podcast until we have gone, so the line is not too bad at Chef Jay Barbecue. So that we can go first before there are people there.
Hey, look, we have a barbecue influencer on screen now, so that's exactly we've got to be very mindful of that when we're producing this show.
And not just barbecue, by the way. Kevin also knows and does a ton with local recruiting, and that's a big part of what, having previously worked at 24/7 Sports, I know Kevin was kind of the expert and the person, the kind of sounding board. Kevin and I have been to a bunch of recruiting camps together, just going back to my time writing about the team, and kind of a memorable story. There was a 3-star recruit who at one point was bordering on 4-star. He was a defensive back who ended up at Georgia. And I remembered seeing him at this camp, and someone had let us know that this guy was going to be out there, and seeing him get kind of picked apart by just sort of random Kansas wide receiver talent. And look, yes, maybe he wasn't trying the hardest. Maybe it wasn't the biggest, highest profile camp, but that was kind of the first moment, at least for me, where I started looking around like, hey, I mean, this is not Florida, this is not Texas, but you're actually starting to get some guys here and some talent. Kevin, what do you think about talent in the Sunflower State? What do you think about talent here?
Yeah, it's a great question, because this is sort of a generational class, right? I mean, I've been sort of following local recruiting since 2002, 2003, somewhere around in there, and started really covering it maybe a year or two after that, and going to all the high school games and seeing all these guys. And Scott Kent, this is the best class that I can remember from an in-state standpoint. It maybe doesn't have, you think of like the Brown brothers and stuff like that, where you had the 5-star recruits and things like that. It maybe doesn't have that at this point, but at the same time, you do have, a really strong top 3, all of whom are likely to be 4-star type guys. And Avery Johnson, the quarterback from Mays, who's going to Kansas State, Dylan Edwards, the running back from Derby, who is headed to Notre Dame, and then John Randall Jr., familiar name for Kansas fans, with John Randall Sr. playing at Kansas. He's still undecided, and so you're going to have those 3 4 stars. But I think what makes this class really different is you're looking at guys even outside that 15 to 20 range in the state and saying there's some guys that might be able to play in the Big 12 among these guys, those kinds of athletes. And so I do think that this is a pretty special class, and 2024 does not look like that. So it's not necessarily a continuation type thing, but
Awesome.
It has been fun to watch.
Kevin, I'm laughing over here to mask the pain of the fact that Kansas doesn't have one kid in the state of Kansas committed for 2023 yet. Do you think they're going to strike out on this class in the state, or is there some hope, here for some of these guys?
Well, it's interesting because I think they may wind up with a kid or two, but maybe on down the line. It might not be on signing day this year. Kansas was a very real player in the recruitment for Calvin Clements, who chose Baylor. And when you look at the way that Baylor has recruited offensive linemen, not that Calvin can't hang at that level. I think he can. But at the same time, that's a situation where they really set themselves up well in case there is a transfer down the line. Another guy that's really interesting to me is Aiden Beamer, the tight end from Blue Valley Northwest, because he's somebody that I think Kansas would take based on athletic numbers, but he hasn't played any tight end. He plays left tackle for Blue Valley Northwest, is like a 6'5", 220-pound guy, but he runs in the 4.6s. So, he's not a left tackle at the next level. He may need to go to like a junior college or something for a year, be a full qualifier, ball out, and maybe Kansas is there on the other end. I know they worked him out and really liked him, and they've had that conversation with him. Trey Richardson was another guy that Kansas, probably could have gotten to commit, but there were some wires crossed on, Richardson wanted to play wide receiver. Kansas wanted him as a running back because they want bigger slot guys who can block, because you're going to be asked to do that more often. Yep. If you're running wide zone 30 times a game and you're going to throw to that wide receiver, 3 to 5 times a game, what's really more important? And so I do think there were some opportunities for them in this class. I don't know that when it comes around to signing day, potentially maybe there's a change or two there. I know there's a really interesting linebacker out of Olathe, Eric Butler, who's a guy that was just shy of, I think, 6'3", around 225 pounds, and ran 4.48 laser time at a Kansas City camp. Kansas knows about him. I think there's been some conversation there. His dad played for Mark Mangino, was a defensive tackle at Kansas. And so maybe, an Eric Butler slips into this class at some point when they evaluate him a little more. But if we were putting odds on it right now, I would say that it's pretty likely that Kansas goes to National Signing Day, without a surprise or two, maybe winds up not getting a guy from this class at least right away.
Yeah, Kevin, I know this is something you've talked a lot about too. And if we get to it, we've got a few things planned today. I do want to circle back to this because I've got a couple things for you on this. But I think the big thing we're excited about doing today, and why we brought Kevin on, we needed 3 of us, so it wasn't just Kent and myself. We're going to draft Kansas skill position players today. And that means basically Jalen Daniels is going to be this team's starting quarterback. We all think he's off the board. We're not going to worry about defense because there's really just one option. So we're going to go back and forth. We predetermined a drafting order. I've already forgotten it. All I know is I'm going second. Does anyone remember what we decided?
Kevin's going first.
I'm going first, but I don't think I had a choice in the matter.
Okay. Hold on, Kevin.
Kevin made this so much harder than it had to be.
List your preferences. They got to their preferences before I did, in fairness. You guys had claim, and then Scott said, okay, your preference is 1. So
that's not quite how that went
down. As long as we just turn it back on Scott, I'm okay. That's fine.
That's what I'm saying. I can't believe in all this.
He's just he's kind of a prima donna.
Perfect. Yeah. It was all Scott.
He's like, we're like 4 episodes in, and this guy is just unbelievably difficult to work with. Like,
that's what they say.
I don't know if we're gonna make it. This podcast might end before the season starts. There's a good probability of that. Well, Kevin, since you do have the first pick that I forced upon you, I'll back up real quick. So we're doing a running back, a receiver, tight end, and a flex.
So 4 positions each, because you can't go that deep. But Kevin, why don't you take us away and give us your first pick?
Sure. I think part of the reason nobody wanted the number 1 pick was Kansas is likely to have a timeshare at running back. And so if you can pick second, as Scott really, really wanted to do, you can get, potentially the other top running back in that timeshare and still be there on the snake around to get a higher pick. So I will pick the guy that I feel like you almost have to pick with the number 1 pick in Devin Neal. I think, there have maybe been some running backs that could get around the same number of touches, maybe. But when you look at what he did last year, the fact that he was already in the system and the explosiveness that he has, he can catch the ball out of the backfield. He can do different things. I do think that Devin Neal would be my first pick.
Kent, draft grade.
Oh, this is the easy pick. I mean, it is. I'm glad I'm not picking first, because I do think that the carries will be spread out around a little bit.
Yep.
But like this is the slam dunk move that you have to make this move. There's no other choice for you. This is a great pick by Kevin.
Yeah, no, I'm in agreement, and I'm a little bit mad that Kevin saw through exactly what my strategy was here. Like, I wanted Devin Neal. I didn't want to go third, but I was like, yeah, I'll go second. I'll take Kai Thomas, who is my pick, for pretty much the same reason you outlined. Look, anytime you go after a high-profile transfer and bring him in, 1, you want to feature him. 2, you come with a plan. And the stories I've heard of Kansas's transfer recruiting goes back to things we've talked about on here and things that we've all seen with this staff, which is, they just have such a detailed plan of, here's how we want to use you. Here's how we can design an offense around you. Here's how we can set you up for success within our offense, and adjust what we do to best fit you, because I think the KU staff is really cognizant of, featuring some things that it wants to do offensively, but also playing to its personnel. From, everything I've heard, that as camp has gone on, Kai Thomas has flashed a little bit more and more. And with that timeshare, you don't have to worry about him wearing down over the, long course of a season. So Kai Thomas, I think, is the easy pick at 2. And that makes the third pick, Ken, the most fun pick of the draft, because you can go anywhere on this.
Well, and it's snake style. So I turn around and get to pick again, right? So I asked Scott before all of this if this was like a PPR type league where
collusion.
We're getting credit for catches and whatnot. And the guy I want is Luke Grimm. I think Luke Grimm is going to be a volume catcher within this offense. I think the slot type player that has shown a pretty diverse route tree, toughness in the middle of the field, soft hands, ability to track the football. There's some positive stuff there that we've seen out of Luke Grimm to this point. I don't know if he's going to be, the leader in touchdown catches for this football team, but I do think from a volume perspective, I think he makes up for it in that regard. We've talked a lot about who could Jalen Daniels turn to as a guy. I think Luke Grimm is the guy I'm going to go with betting on that guy. I'm a little nervous here. I don't love this strategy entirely of going third and volunteering to go third, but I do like Luke Grimm. I have some concerns here down the road. I'll point to them when I get a little worried. But Luke Grimm, I don't know, Kevin, what do you think? Do you think Luke Grimm is the volume catcher for this offense? Do you think there's a good chance of that happening?
Yeah, I think there's a really good chance. When I was down in Texas and covered recruiting to a major extent there, I had a college coach tell me once that, yes, athletic numbers were important. Yes, size is important, but there's always a market for a guy who gets open and catches the ball. And that's Luke Grimm, right? When they took Luke Grimm, I think they initially Scott targeted him as a safety, and then
they switched him at a camp.
Yeah, and then moved him over kind of at the last minute. And it was one of those things where I remember having the conversation with Scott where it was, this guy's going to play early, not necessarily because they want him to play early, but they're not going to have a choice. He's going to be good enough. And I think not only have you seen that, I think there's a tendency sometimes, Kent, with guys like Luke Grimm to feel like they're maxed out or they are what they are. But I think that when you watched him over the latter part of last year, I did think that you saw Luke Grimm come on and show some improvement and some things that he didn't show as a freshman and earlier on in his career.
Well, and it's weird because it coincides with Jalen Daniels playing too, right? Like that's the thing you got to take into consideration too. We've seen Jalen Daniels and Luke Grimm together pairing very nicely. And so that's what I'm banking on here. with my first pick in the draft.
Yeah, and Kent, when we made this a PPR, when we made that designation, when you bullied us into doing that, I moved Luke Grimm up my board immediately. Like I originally had him. I was kind of like third, fourth. I put him up as my top wide receiver after that.
I should have told
that was who you were targeting the second you asked that question.
Yeah, of course it was.
Yeah.
I think it was so transparent. If you guys are going to go with the running backs, I've got to try to get a little creative here. That's why, I bullied myself into a PPR. Okay, so Luke Grimm, round 1 pick. I have to get a running back here because if I don't get a running back here, you two are going to take. One of you is going to take Daniel Highshaw from me.
Yeah, and
I like Daniel Highshaw. The reports out of camp, very strong camp. This is a bigger guy that I think can be the goal line back potentially. This is a guy that could potentially snipe some touchdowns from some of the bigger, from the Devin Neals and the Kai Thomases of the world. This is not a bad problem to have. We know Andy Kodanik, he talks about a pair in the spare.
Yep.
Well, the spare we all thought were 3 running backs in. He's not even been mentioned yet. I'm sure he's coming off the board relatively quick here, but I love the idea of getting Daniel Highshaw. I think if anything happens to one of Devin Neal or Kai Thomas, God forbid, Daniel Highshaw can also step in and perform more than admirably. I really like this pick. I really like the value here.
Yeah, I think one of the things with Highshaw too is he was a high school quarterback. And so you go back and watch the tape, and as a true freshman, he's out there running for 87 yards against Texas Tech and all of that. And I don't know that a lot of people realize that he should have plenty of upside, just from not playing the position. And he may have been there for a breakout year last year, had the injury. A lot of accounts were that he's been the best running back through camp so far. I know Scott was saying, Kai Thomas has maybe been the best back the last week or week and a half, maybe 2 weeks. But if you go through the entirety of camp, I think you'd be able to find people who said that Highshaw was the best back on the team over that period.
Yeah, and you've got one added benefit here, which is Lance Leipold kind of stuck up for him in a press conference. He was asked what I thought was a very good and fair question about the talent level on the team. And I think he took exception to the term recruited over, and he went on kind of a rant about guys holding their own, which in another way was kind of the point of the question, right? Like the question was, how have guys responded to you bringing in this talent? And he said, well, hey, they're holding their own, which was a pretty good answer. But Daniel Highshaw was that guy. And he sort of stood out there and said, hey, no one is pushing Daniel Highshaw around. Daniel Highshaw is doing well. So it would not shock me if Daniel Highshaw gets on the field before any of the transfer running backs, just for Lance Leipold to fully bring home that point. I like that pick. I was actually going to take him. I was going to go running back. I
knew it was coming. I knew I did not have a choice. I knew I didn't have a choice.
Wide receiver, though, I got to go wide receiver, and there are 2. I would be thrilled with either of them. I am going to take LJ Arnold, and I'm going to leave Kevin a guy that I'm actually probably higher on than LJ Arnold and Douglas Emilian. But I think the thing with LJ Arnold is he's been around. He knows the system. He's got all the athletic, the long jump, the high jump. He's been there basically. And it was also a case where he almost wasn't there. KU had a chance to convince him to stay. And I think through that process, that tells you they believe in him, they want him around, and they want him to be a focal point of sorts. So I will take him, mostly because I've been burned by transfers too many times. I already have one on my team. But, Kevin, I'm leaving you a wide receiver who, from everything I've heard and seen in person from when I was out at camp, looked really impressive to me.
Yeah, Douglas Emilian was my wide receiver 1. And even with the PPR format, I think Luke Grimm has a chance to lead the team in catches. I think Kent nailed it on that. But I think that Emilian has a chance to sort of do what Kwame Lassiter did a couple years ago, where he's not your top receiver heading into the season. A few weeks in, though, you find that, hey, we're playing TCU. We're up against it. Nobody's getting open except for Douglas Emilian, so let's throw the ball that way. And I think when you watch Emilian's tape, he's such an electric route runner. Some guys just have that trait. And I know Kent covers the Chiefs exceptionally well. A guy, like Sky Moore, the way that he is able to use speeds to make his speed play up. That's something that you see a lot with Emilian. It's not necessarily that, hey, here's a guy that's going to line up and just kill you with a 9 route all day. I mean, it's more that he understands body control. He understands how to get defenders on the wrong foot. He understands change of pace and how to get corners playing at his pace. And so Emilian is going to be my pick right there. I think on the swing around, this is a tough one for me because there are some wide receivers there that I think have upside to where you could potentially see them being one of the top couple wide receivers. But with Emilian maybe being a little bit of an upside pick with me, I'm going to go safe and go with Trevor Cardell here.
Ooh.
That's where I was going next. I almost took him last pick too.
I think Cardell is a really interesting combination because he was a high school wide receiver and not like a big slot, like a guy that you lined up out there as an X wide receiver and has put on a lot of weight, is one of the better blocking tight ends that they have, especially when you look at, Mason Fairchild and some of those guys that maybe he's battling for playing time a little bit. With this staff that blocking it is sort of the key to unlocking playing time at that spot. And so I think Cardell is going to get a chance to play quite a bit because of the blocking. And even in addition to that, I think he has the receiving skills to where we could see him have a nice year catching passes too.
Kent, I'm upset already. When I first made my draft board, Kevin has drafted my running back one, my wide receiver one, and my tight end one. Now I moved it around. I overthought some things, but Kevin literally walked away with my top at each position.
That's what you get for making me take number one, I guess.
Oh yeah, we twisted your arm, and here you are.
I'm gonna test Ken's preparedness here because with how well Kevin is drafting, I would argue that Kevin has been the draft king so far for us. Kent, you ready?
Yeah. Well, speaking of DraftKings, did you know the state of Kansas that DraftKings Sportbook is coming to the Sunflower State? It won't be long until you can bet on all your favorite sports from the comfort of your own home. And to celebrate, all new customers will receive $100 in free bets when you sign up using code KCSN. That is KCSN. Plus, one lucky customer will win $100,000 free bet. That's right. DraftKings Sportsbook is giving you $100 in free bets just for signing up today with promo code KCSN, and no deposit is required. Soon you'll be able to bet on money lines, spreads, props, and more with one of America's top-rated sportsbook apps, DraftKings Sportsbook. Plus, you'll be entered to win a $100,000 free bet when you sign up. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and sign up with code KCSN to get $100 in free bets to use once mobile sports betting hits Kansas. Plus, one customer will win a $100,000 free bet. That's code KCSN only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Gambling problem? Getting help is your best bet. Call 800-522-4700. 21 plus, physically present in Kansas. Eligibility restrictions apply. See terms at DraftKings.com/sportsbook. Subject to regulatory licensing requirements. One per customer. $100 issued as 4 $25 free bets. No purchase necessary for sweepstake. Void where prohibited. Ends first day DraftKings is allowed to operate in Kansas. See terms at DraftKings.com/Kansas or DKNG.co/KS.
Kent, do you need a breather?
Is it my turn to draft? No, there's a draft. There's a round before.
He can catch up while Scott picks.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm gonna go pass out now.
Okay, I'm gonna pick very quickly. You did that. Andrew looked great in your Charlie Hustle shirt while doing it. So
what?
Scott's
such a professional, man.
That's a streamlined way to do an ad. Anyway,
good Lord.
Okay, let me make my pick here. So my problem is I have 2 tight ends that I like. I also have 2 skill position guys that I like, and I'm afraid the guy I want most in either event will be off the board because Kent gets 2 picks. So I'm going to take Mason Fairchild, who my personal opinion is probably should be Kansas's 3rd tight end. Just based off, I think there are other tight ends that are better at blocking. I think Jared Casey has emerged as a guy who's capable of doing a whole lot of things, but Mason Fairchild has playing experience. He has playing experience under multiple staffs. He's a guy who has been big or who has been featured in the receiving game. And I think in time, you have to trust his development, his growth. And I think Lance Leipold has shown kind of a stick-to-itiveness with him. And same with Andy Kotelnicki. So I know down the stretch injuries kind of changed around the tight end room. I think Jared Casey's a very good player. I think he'll kind of by default be Kent's pick at tight end, not to spoil anything. But I'm going to count on Mason Fairchild PPR to get me a few points here. And I'll go with that.
Well,
do you guys know?
I was going to say, Scott, you broke down a lot of film on the team last year. And one of the things that you had mentioned was that Mason Fairchild was a lot better blocker at the end of the year, before he got hurt than he was in those first few games.
They could not block. The tight ends trying to block early in the year was a hot mess. I think we talked about this on the first episode.
Yeah.
It was so bad.
Oh yeah.
It took him a while. Ken, I am curious. While you were reading your ad, I actually want to ask you this question to go back a pick. So Kevin and I, LJ Arnold, Douglas Emelian. Who would you have taken if you could have chosen between the receivers and then go on to your two picks?
I would have taken Douglas Emelian.
Yes.
And I would have taken the guy I'm about to take right here.
Okay.
So I am thrilled, and I've been nervous this entire time. Do you guys know who Jared Casey's first NIL deal was with?
I know the answer to this question, but I'm partially employed by them right now.
Kevin, do you know the answer?
Was it Applebee's or are you
No.
talking about somebody else?
It was KC Sports Network.
No, I did not know that.
We were the first. We were Jared Casey's first NIL deal. He came.
I was like, man, Scott's working at Applebee's. Wow, that's a heck of a reveal.
Hey.
Like, just dropping that in mid-episode.
Tucker, that's the open right there. Look at that, please.
Yeah, no, Scott, he's been serving up those delicious dollar margs on the side in between KCS and
2 for 20,
and the 2 for 20s. I mean, he's out here grinding and hustling. He actually left media to start working at Applebee's. No shame in that. Jared Casey was the first, or KCSN was the first for Jared Casey. I'm going with Jared Casey. I know, like, yes, the prototype, the physical prototypes are there for Trevor Cardell and Mason Fairchild. I like what Jared Casey did at the end of the year. The same thing we just got done talking about with Luke Grimm. Maybe I'm relying on the 3-game sample size with Jalen Daniels, but there was a very obvious connection with Jared Casey and with Jalen Daniels. And you're talking about a guy who has, by all indications, the best hands on the team, some are saying, and a guy that has done it in the past, a sample size of doing it. I mean, I'm looking at what Jared Casey had: 8 catches for 101 yards and 2 touchdowns, 12.6 yards per catch. I mean, he almost out-caught Mason Fairchild. He averaged almost 3 yards per catch more than Mason Fairchild last year. I'm very encouraged by the prospect of Jared Casey continuing to build off of what he did last year. And I'm beyond thrilled to be getting him as the 3rd tight end. Maybe I'm getting duped and you guys know something I don't, like he got hurt today or something, but I'm hyped about Jared Casey as the 3rd tight end off the board. What kept you guys? I'll ask you guys, what kept you, Kevin, what kept you from taking Jared Casey?
Sure. He was my 2nd tight end, behind Trevor Cardell. And one of the things that I really liked about Jared Casey too is you've heard about them using multiple running backs this year, to try and get Devin Neal and Kai Thomas and Highshaw and Savion Morrison all on the field, together. But I think the other thing that Kansas could do this year that maybe you haven't heard as much about or conversations about is Jared Casey could play some fullback in addition to tight end. If you wanted to go out there with a single tight end and motion him around or do different things, he could be your point of attack guy in the running game with the way that he blocks. And if you have that, it's not that hard to sneak that guy out for a catch here and there. There was a fullback in the Mangino era. I don't know if you remember Austin Wabusi, who was a guy that they kind of snuck out in goal line situations, and sort of ran that boot that is always open in college games. I don't know what the deal is. Maybe it's a rule they passed with like the NCAA football franchise and EA Sports, but that play always works on the goal line and the little throwback bootleg. And I feel like Jared Casey has a chance to put up some goal line production, either as a fullback sniffer guy or as a legitimate tight end too.
Yeah. Ken, I just wanted to make you happy. That's why I left him for you.
Oh, okay,
that's so
sure.
Nice.
Applebee's gift cards on the way too, or Okay. So I'm back up. And I'm beyond thrilled to get the returning leader in receiving yards for Kansas football last year. I'm going wide receiver Trevor Wilson.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got the second highest I've got the most receiving yards, the second most returning receiving yards, and the fifth most returning receiving yards on my football team, on my fantasy team here at this point. Trevor Wilson, a guy that gets a little bit overlooked. I mean, there's a little bit more high variance, I think, to what Trevor Wilson's done to this point. I don't think he's the guy that's going to be operating at the slot and being the high volume catcher that maybe some of these other guys are. But there's some very real vertical stretchability to his game. You saw the catch against Duke. I mean, Jalen Daniels can air it out. And I think if you're looking at how this team's wanting to improve and make some improvements, some of the shot plays are probably an area that this team undoubtedly need to improve. I mean, even when Jalen Daniels was, working, it wasn't necessarily a ton of shot plays down the field that were having a ton of success. They were moving the chains. They were having to make some difficult fourth down decisions. They were in some third and short kind of situations. It was a lot more methodical. The explosives, I think Trevor Wilson's a guy that's going to help generate some of those explosives if they're going to find them this season. Give me Trevor Wilson. I love the value down here. Scott, pick it apart, but I don't think you're going to be able to.
No. So that I had two flex options. He was one of them. One, I think you look at what he did at Buffalo that year that he was there. I think he only had like 300-ish receiving yards, but you look at yards per catch, and it was insane. It was like 30 yards per catch or something like that. It may not have been exactly that, but it was just an absolutely crazy total. I think when he came to Kansas, there was hope about featuring him more in special teams. I don't think he has the hands for that. And I know it's different in terms of receiving versus like in the punt game. I remember going out to camp and seeing him actually have, some problems fielding punts, but the staff still trusted him. They still threw him into games. He made some incredibly impressive catches. Kevin, I'm a fan of Trevor Wilson.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think, Kent hit the nail on the head in that if they want to be successful, you can't just live with the 7 to 10 yard completions. You have to get people out of the box. And that was really what Trevor Wilson did for them at Buffalo. They ran play action, had him just run by somebody, and then they hit him for 40 yards. And they did it at a fairly high rate. And you look at the quarterback position for a lot of last year, not that Jason Bean played badly, but it was a little bit unsettled, I think you could say, from a passing standpoint. And if Jalen Daniels can bring consistency as a thrower this year, I think Wilson's somebody that could, really see his stock take off as he takes the top off of defenses.
Wilson was my wide receiver 4, and the only reason was I felt like he had a much better connection with Jason Bean than Jalen Daniels, but I don't think that's a him thing, or like a knock against him. I just think, and you got the guy who I would have put first then in Luke Grimm. So, I think it all balances out. My flex, my last pick here, I'm going with Savion Morrison. I almost took him over Mason Fairchild, actually. So I'm happy I get him, back on the other side. I think, there's some exciting stuff he can do in the return game. I think he won't be featured as a running back as much as the other 3 guys who we obviously drafted a little bit earlier. But where I do think he'll get those chances, maybe on some of those like jet sweep action or those kind of pop passes. I think, Kent, you brought that up at one point. I think they'll find a way to get him involved. I don't think he'll have a huge workload, but with the PPR aspect of this, I would bet that they get him, working out of the slot, just moving around the offense. I think they'll find a role for him.
Well, and when was the last time Kansas got through the season with a full complement of running backs? So you look at that too. I mean, and Savion Morrison's a player or two away from having a really big role if he doesn't, get one outright anyway, because the staff, I think, is likely to roll with the hot hand. And if somebody isn't being that guy, I don't know that they're going to hesitate to get him out there and give him a shot. So, yeah, I do think there's upside with that pick for sure.
I mean, we are, let's see here. I got to do quick math. That's the 13th pick in this draft.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going with Savion Morrison, a former 4-star player who a lot of people were excited about. If we had done this fantasy draft in, call it, June, Savion Morrison's the 3rd pick. You know, and I mean, I think he goes over Daniel Highshaw, but I think the buzz about Daniel Highshaw is just undeniable. I think it's there's been some injury stuff with Savion Morrison and all that stuff, but I love the value down here this late. And I mean, there's plenty of reason to be excited about him too. I mean, it's just like I think some of the other guys are getting a lot more shine right now, but KU, like we talked about it, they're an extremely deep running back position, and so I love the value of Savion Morrison down here, and there will be a game or two where he makes impact plays. He might be a little bit more high variance, and like his usage might be a little different than some of these other guys that we've outlined. But I mean, there's a lot to like about Savion Morrison, especially this late. I'm looking at Scott's draft, and I like it too much. I'm a little jealous.
I like you. It's funny. I was just thinking, wow, I have clearly the worst draft of the three of us. And I'll take
Savion Morrison down here?
And that is why Scott is serving riblets.
Yes. Kevin, bring us home. You have the last pick. And then I do want to extend this. If you've got like 5 good minutes after this draft, I want to keep this going just a little.
Yeah, for my last one, I wanted to swing on maybe some upside, right? Because you could get somebody like Tavita Noah here who may get in as like, your third tight end or second tight end, get a little something. But I think with how unsettled that wide receiver room is and how we don't necessarily see the proven guys there, I'd like to swing on Tanaka Scott here.
Ooh.
You have a big, fast, athletic guy, and the main criticism of him seems to be, well, he hasn't done it on Saturdays yet. Well, there's only one way to do it on Saturdays, and if for whatever reason the receiver position isn't giving them what they want, you could go a lot worse than the 6'4" guy who can really run. I know Scott and I heard some kind of hilarious reports about him when he first came to Kansas that, hey, this guy can pretty much only run a go in a post. Having said that, that gets completed 50% of the time. So with him having that talent and skill set, I think there's at least a chance for him to sneak into that top wide receiver group. And if so, a 6'4" guy who can run, makes for a pretty nice security blanket.
Yeah. Any picks that you guys had or any players you thought about taking that didn't make the cut? I'll give my one. I really thought about taking Jason Bean as my flex.
I knew you were gonna pull something like that. I knew you were gonna pull something like that. I mean, come on.
I was thinking about it. I was just thinking about it. He's gonna play, and I think he's gonna play not only some quarterback, but they'll mix him in sometimes. But I held off the urge just so I didn't upset the room.
Along with the Tanaka Scott pick, I was also considering Quentin Skinner, for sort of the same role. He's somebody that Jason Bean had said was one of the 3 or 4 fastest guys on the team. He's 6'5", similar sort of theory to Tanaka Scott, just being a bigger guy who can run. They just put him on scholarship, so you figure he's going to get a chance to maybe do something. So he was somebody that I had on there as sort of a swing on this guy in case of emergency type deal, but he was definitely on my list.
Kevin got the last pick in this draft. So swing on in case of emergency might have been over preparation on your part there, Kevin.
Well, you never know.
I appreciate it.
I thought about Earl Bostic.
Well,
yeah, you never know. They've done, I think they tried it last year, didn't they?
A couple years ago, but he's played some tight end.
He was a high school tight end.
I know. Well, he was a high school everything, wasn't he? I just remember. I mean, David Beatty thought every guy was a future NFL player, but there was definitely. I mean, he hit on Earl Bostic. He's like, hey, this guy's a two-star player. He's pretty under recruited, but I think he could be a left tackle someday, and he was right. He turned out to be a really good left tackle. Before we get to the next segment, let me run down this list of list teams. I would love if you want to leave a comment and tell us who won this. If you want to leave a 5-star review for the channel and tell us who won this fantasy draft. Kevin went Devin Neal, Douglas Emilion, Mason Fairchild, and Tanaka Scott.
Trevor Cardell.
Trevor Cardell.
Trevor Cardell. I'm going to run down the teams here, and you can leave us a 5-star comment. You can reply to this YouTube video. You can scream it from the rooftops who you think won this draft. No, I'm kidding. Kent, go ahead.
Scott's like, and Scott had Devin Neal, Kai Thomas.
Scott
I had Cook Williams.
Scott had Scott had Kai Thomas, LJ Arnold, Mason Fairchild, Savion Morrison. The best team had Daniel Highshaw, Luke Grimm, Jared Casey, and Trevor Wilson. That was mine. Go ahead and just, you know what to do, commenter. Okay, Scott, you had one more thing you wanted to cover with Kevin. Let's get to that before we get out of here.
Yeah, Kevin, I'm actually going to jump ahead because I know we had some plans. We're going to have you back on at some point because we got to see how these teams are doing.
Sure.
Mid-season, late season, we'll figure it out. But I wanted to run down your confidence scale, and we can keep these relatively short, but I'd love, if you gave an explanation too. I've got 5 of these for you. And Ken, I'd love your thoughts too. So first, I'll start with the area, Kevin, that you know really well. Kansas is doing the right things in local recruiting. Confidence scale 1 to 10. Where are you at with that?
I'd say 5, and it's not necessarily they're putting in more effort than previous staffs, and I think that's a really strong thing. I think with this class in particular, maybe they haven't always been pointed in the right direction at the right time would maybe be the best way to put it. But I do think that if they manage to get a kid or two out of this class, even if it's on down the road, I do think coaches are seeing the effort that they're putting in. And it's kind of funny. I had a conversation with a high school coach who had said that this staff could almost not fail in local recruiting, because as long as they did something, people were going to see that it was an improvement and that they were trying. And I really do think, Kansas pushed hard for Avery Johnson. They weren't going to get him, but they recruited him. They pushed for Dylan Edwards. They got Dylan Edwards to visit. Some of the top guys at Kansas City, made it over to Lawrence. And so I do think that they laid the foundations, and I think it's going to be really interesting to watch in 2024, because right now the top recruit is a kid named BJ Kennedy out of Topeka. I think he's probably going to wind up being the defensive tackle. He's a really big body defensive end right now, but BJ Kennedy is high on Kansas. And so I think that when you look at the way that they've recruited the 2023 class with as strong as it is, a lot of these guys emerged really early, before Lance Leipold was even here. And so I do think that they did some things really well. I think there were obviously some things that they could have done better, but it maybe sets them up well for the future.
Okay. And Ken, I want to bring you in on this one too. How good do you feel about Kansas's quarterback spot? Kent, you go, and then Kevin. 1 to 10.
I've got good receipts on Jalen Daniels. I strongly believe that KU has a guy that can legitimately compete at a high level and be part of the reason that this team gets back to respectability. I am all in on what Jalen Daniels has done in a short sample size. I am completely buying this. I think, by the end of his career, you're going to look back on him as, he wanted to come and he wanted to be part of this and turn this thing around. I think you're going to look back and say he did. I genuinely believe that about Jalen Daniels.
Hat tip, Brent Dearman. Kent, you got a number?
A number
1 to 10. We need your confidence.
Oh, I need a number.
Sounds like a 10.
Yeah, it's a 10. I think I feel uber confident in what this kid's doing. Give me a 10. All in. I'm all in.
Kevin understood the game.
Sorry.
I understood the assignment.
Do you see what I have to put up with, Kevin? Again, this is one of the most miserable podcasting experiences I've had in my life.
Yes.
I get it,
Kevin.
I definitely get it. We were talking about over some lovely barbecue, shout back to that. If you look at the 10 best throws by a Kansas quarterback in the last decade, I think we agreed Jalen Daniels has probably had 7 of them. When you look at the big time, make the defense fear you, the coverage wasn't that bad and he still, put it on somebody type of throw. He's made some really big time throws. And I think one of the most impressive things about him was, and Scott covered Kansas for his freshman year, really closely. I thought Jalen Daniels was dead about 5 different times his freshman year.
Yeah.
He took some absolute shots. The one against Baylor stands out. I think maybe he took one against Oklahoma that was, really bad.
Yeah. And he got injured. Both tackles got blown by and he got sandwiched.
And he just kept getting back up over and over again. And I think, while there are some people who maybe aren't Kansas fans, they look at those freshman year stats because Kansas fans look at the stats from the last 3 games and say, this is Jalen Daniels. they say, well, look at the career numbers. I think when you watched him closely, the toughness that he displayed over and over, and then what you saw last year in the improvement and the accuracy, the ability to make plays off schedule when he needed to. The game-winning pass against Texas was off schedule.
Yeah.
That play got absolutely blown up. And Jalen Daniels eludes the rush, throws it back across his body to Jared Casey for the win. I'm not quite as high, but I think I'd probably go like an 8.5. I'm pretty high on Jalen Daniels. And it's funny, Scott, I know you remember 24/7's Brandon Huffman was kind of his area scout and had seen him quite a bit. And when Kansas wound up getting him with Brent Dearman, he goes, I love that stocky little kid. He's like, he's going to be really good at Kansas. He says the only thing is he's short and he's got baby fat, but man, he's really good. And I think, when you look at the way that his time at Kansas has played out, you can see all the different things that make him potentially a franchise guy for Kansas.
For sure. All right, this one's quick. This one's easy. I'm like at a 9 on this one. Devin Neal is an NFL running back.
Ooh. Who's going first?
I'll go. I think it's about a 9 too. I mean, and just the measurables, if nothing else, you're talking about a guy that before he even enrolled at KU was working out in Kansas City and was weighing 218, running 4.48, and had a 39-inch vertical. And if you're that big, that fast, that explosive, that's gonna draw some NFL eyes, I think.
So I'm a little bit less confident from an NFL perspective, and this is
I'm never coming back.
I know, right? I like Devin Neal a lot. I think a lot of what you just said has a ton of merit. There's a lot of size and there's some power to him. There's some good athletic profile. I don't know. I think he's a little bit stiff. I don't know if he's the most dynamic player in space. I think he's more of a downhill type player that you want, you kind of want getting downhill, not necessarily a guy that's able to change directions. And so because of that, I'm not as totally confident in his profile translating well to the NFL level, especially as a pass catcher. I think there's a little bit of rigidity there too. Like he's capable of doing it and operating basic staples out of the backfield, but I'm a little bit less sure about the entire profile translating perfectly. That being said, it's still like a 7.5 for me.
Kent, I would, if I could jump in real quick, I would just say, watch the pass blocking this year. Because from everything I've heard, that's where he wants to take the next step. Maybe pass catching should be there too, but that's what I'm watching this year.
If he can be that big and he gets in the right scheme and he can pass pro, like that'll be a good sign. I think he's a great college back, and I think the air is still pointing up for him. I mean, he's only a sophomore. He's still got plenty of time to prove me wrong. I'm a little bit more wait and see with him. This is going to be a huge year for him to kind of help determine his outlook. But I can't wait. I mean, he was only a freshman last year. I mean, we got to give him some time. He's only a sophomore. And we'll have plenty of time to talk about him and plenty of other things the rest of the season. Thank you all so much for listening. Thank you to Kevin Flaherty for joining us today. For me and Scott Chasen, this is Booth Review. We'll catch you later.